Hello, and welcome to this episode of Spotlight on the Divorce Expert. And every week, I try to bring you a different divorce professional who has an interesting, unique, or I think essential role to play in supporting people through the divorce process. So today I have the opportunity to speak with psychotherapist Oona Metz. She specializes in helping women navigate the divorce process. Oona offers weekly divorce support groups, actually 3 weekly support groups in person in the Boston area. But she also does trainings for other mental health professionals to help them be effective at leading groups. And we're going to talk today about why groups are so important for women going through divorce and the role that they can play in helping you navigate the process. But before we get into that, I want to just mention that Oona is also a speaker, and she is the author of her brand new book, about to be published, book called Unhitched, The Essential Divorce Guide for Women. So, Oona, I want to welcome you today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really wonderful to be here.
And I think it's great to have this opportunity to share on this podcast, a YouTube episode of the podcast, to talk about all of not only the resources that you offer in your book, but the message of your book. So let's start with your book, Oona, because I think it's such a phenomenal resource for women. So tell us a little bit about yourself and why you wrote this.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. So I have been a therapist for about 30 years, and a little over 15 years ago, I started running divorce support groups, as you mentioned, and I have 3 weekly divorce support groups here in Boston. And there's so much great information that comes from the groups, so much great information that I've learned over the time leading these groups. And the women in the groups really wanted a recommendation for a good book. And I finally decided I've got to write the book. So it's really a book about the emotional journey of divorce. And I'm really excited that it's coming out so soon.
Yeah, and I'm really excited too, because I think that so I work mostly with high achieving women, and they don't want to deal necessarily with the emotional side of divorce. They would like to just focus a little bit more on the facts and the figures and just getting it done, like getting it over. So it's no longer
Right.
a factor in their life. But as a psychotherapist, I'm sure that you see the long-term effects of maybe not dealing with some of these emotions in divorce. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of grief that's involved in divorce. It's different than grieving somebody, a loved one who dies, but really it is the death of a marriage. And not only that, it's really people who go through divorce are having to really think about their new identity. They're letting go of their identity as being part of an intact family. Um, and really, that needs to, they need to do some work of grieving in order to get to the other side of that and to be able to learn. Because I believe that divorce can be very heartbreaking and stressful and difficult, but it also, if you do the grieving work, it can really be an opportunity for growth and healing and transformation. So, the last thing I want people to do is to get through with their divorce and then pop right back into another relationship that's not good for them.
Yeah. And we know,
So I
I mean,
think
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so I think to do some of that work of really feeling your feelings, even though it's hard to do that work, and grieving the marriage, grieving the good parts of the marriage, grieving, the sense that you had a future together, grieving all the different parts of your identity will make it so that, you're much less likely to end up in a situation where you get divorced again. Because I think what you were going to say is we know the divorce rate for second marriages is even higher than
Yes.
for first marriages. And
Yeah.
for third, it's even higher than that.
Yes.
Right?
And we
Yeah.
do see, I think we're recognizing at least a lot of like just lay people like myself that aren't mental health professionals are see that most people can acknowledge that there's a pattern of behavior, pattern of getting into relationships. And maybe it's not even marriages, but maybe it's just long-term relationships or even short-term relationships where maybe you were living together or maybe you were just dating, but you're with the same kind of guy or woman every single relationship. There, I always like to say this, and I would say this to myself as well. If you go through a multiple bad relationships, there's one common denominator there.
That's right.
And it's not the partners, it's you. And I've heard people say, why can't I just pick better people? Maybe that's because you haven't dealt with some of the stuff that at a therapeutic level that could help you make better choices.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I think there are two major mistakes that people make in dating after divorce. And one is they date the exact same kind of person over again because it feels familiar. Sure. They know that. They know how to be in that kind of relationship. So they think that the familiarity means that that's something they should be in or they know how to do, even though it didn't work out the first time. And the second mistake that people make is going a full 180 and dating somebody who's the exact opposite of their ex. And usually that doesn't work out so well either. Because you married your ex for some reason, right? They weren't completely terrible for most people, right? And so so that's oftentimes just a reaction, right? And it's not good to date just because of a reaction.
And it's interesting. Who said this? I can't remember. Maybe something along the lines of women pick partners as fixer uppers and men pick partners who are familiar and comfortable. In other words, remind them of their, whatever they need.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what I often say to women is, don't date somebody's potential.
Yes.
Really
oh my gosh.
Think about what is the reality, not what the person says they're trying to do or they want to do differently, or, they're a great person. They just haven't, had a job for 3 years. Well, listen to that. They haven't had a job for 3 years. That doesn't, that's important information.
Or they've had 10 jobs in 3 years. Or something.
Yes, exactly. They keep getting fired from a job. But only if they would find the right one, then they would be fine.
Exactly.
No.
And the other piece of advice, and I believe this was from my mom. She said, if you're dating somebody and all they want to do is talk about how bad all their exes were, that's a big red flag. Yeah.
Big red flag. Yep.
So in your groups, I know that you have used that, the stories, obviously not word for word from people, but kind of combinations of the stories and ideas that the women have presented. What are some of the prevalent or most common issues or concerns that you see women that come to your support groups? What are they focused on, let's say, during the divorce phase?
I mean, almost all of the women that I see are parents. And so certainly they're concerned with their kids and how can they best support their kids through this time. Many of them are co-parenting. Some of them are single parenting. And really, we talk a lot about how to decrease conflict in co-parenting so that we can really protect the kids from that kind of conflict. So that's one thing that people talk about a lot. The people who come to my group also tend to be in longer term divorces. So their divorces are taking a long time. So we're really also focused on how do you sprint through a marathon? How do you build in breaks for yourself? How do you take time for yourself? How do you have self-care? And when do you stand up for yourself? When is that really important? And when do you let go so that you get to the end? And really thinking about that balance of when it's important to really advocate for yourself and when is it important to say, I can't do this anymore. And I want to, when is that self-care of kind of saying, I'm done. and
Yeah,
done with the negotiations.
that is great. So I work with clients quite often who are in like 2 or 3 year long divorces
Hmm.
with maybe not even a light at the end of the tunnel now.
Yes.
Um, and I completely agree with you. There comes a time where you just have to say, is it worthwhile
Right.
fighting, continuing the
Hmm.
fight over $50,000, or is $50,000 not worth
Hmm.
my mental and physical health anymore? And I'm not suggesting
That's
you
right.
should give up anything, but I'm saying
Sure.
there comes a point where, it's
Hmm.
the law of diminishing returns, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to spend another $20,000 to fight over $50,000? Because now you're not getting $50,000 anymore. But it's hard
Right.
when you're in the divorce process and it's so adversarial, it's hard to
Hmm.
see past your own thoughts on this. And this is where I think
Yes.
like group support would just be phenomenal to have that.
Yeah, to have additional people who really get what you're going through and are going through it themselves, be able to give you different perspectives. That's one of the things that's so valuable about the divorce groups that I run, is that the women come in and they get to have a lot of different perspectives, all very supportive.
Right.
Nobody's challenging or judging, but they're offering their own opinions and their own um, situations.
And with the
So,
groups meeting regularly, there's that sense of community, there's trust, there's
yes,
confidentiality. I know that you focus a lot on that when you bring people into the group. And I just can't
absolutely.
imagine that kind of support because I didn't have it when I went through my divorce, but
Mm.
I would
Mhm.
think it would be something that's just phenomenal.
So many women at the end of the group, they say to me, I don't know how I could have ever made it through my divorce without this group. And I do ask that while they're members of the group, they're not getting together outside, so they don't have a social relationship. But once they leave the group, they are encouraged to have a social relationship. And sometimes they become lifelong friends.
Sure.
And so I'll get a picture from some of them. Oh, here we are at this restaurant, or here we are at the beach, and we're all together. And, so years later, and that's really wonderful to see that they've created community for
Yeah.
themselves, a supportive community.
And it only makes sense that, whenever you go through a shared challenge,
Yes.
that you're going to have that relatability with other people that you've gone through it with. I will
Yeah.
ask you something, Una, that just came into my mind. What, how many women on are that you have seen in the past have got really hung up on needing to hear an apology from their ex? Do you
Mm-hmm.
get that often in group, and kind of how do you navigate through that with your group clients?
Oh, that's a great question. And that's something that we talk about in the group a lot. And it's also something that I address in the book. Um, so I think there's so many things to let go of in a divorce. And one of the things to let go of is the other person's narrative. And I think women can get really stuck if they're stuck on trying to make their ex have the same narrative that they do, or trying to extract an apology. And so, oftentimes, if women come in and they're in a certain situation and they really want their ex to apologize, I ask them to use their powers of prediction. And I say, if you say to your ex, I'm really hurt that you did such and such and such, what, knowing your ex as you do, what are the chances that your ex is going to say back to you, oh gosh, I didn't realize that was hurtful to you. I am so sorry. And I promise I'll never do it again. And they say, 0%. There's a 0% chance that that's going to happen. And I say, so do you really want to send that text?
Yeah.
Right? Like, really use your powers of prediction. Don't go to the hardware store to get milk, right?
Right. That's a, and the reason
Right?
I ask that is because I've actually been in mediations because I was
Mhm.
and still am a family and divorce mediator. I don't do a lot of the mediation anymore. I like the coaching side better, but I have been in mediations where we have settled a multi-million dollar divorce settlement,
Hmm.
got everything nailed down, everything's fine. And then somebody says, but I'm not signing until you say I'm sorry. And I've
Right,
seen him tear
right.
up the whole agreement over that. Just like,
Yep,
forget it, we'll go to court. Well, you go to court, the
right,
judge doesn't care. You're never going to hear it.
right.
The judge is not going to
That's right.
criticize. They're just going to, yeah. People have such an
That's right.
unrealistic expectation of what litigation looks like and the
Hmm.
cost and the emotional
Right.
stress that's involved in that process.
Oh, so true. And somebody could say, fine, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
But do they really mean it? Does it really land on the person?
right,
I think it's very rare. It's a very rare situation that somebody can actually make a heartfelt apology. It's wonderful when it happens, and it usually happens from people who are very mature and who haven't had a very acrimonious divorce,
right,
you know. But
right,
the more acrimonious it is, the less likely there is going to be an apology. And again, that's something that people need to let go of and grieve, right?
right,
I'm never going to get that apology. I'm never, or my spouse is never going to have consequences for their actions. You know, they acted terribly in the marriage and there's not going to be a consequence. And
right.
I say to them, you know, there may or may not be. We don't know if karma exists or not, but the reality is, do you want to trade places with that person? No, you don't. If
Right,
that person is acting terribly and not apologizing for it, they're probably not having a great life. So you have to move on. You have to
right.
move on and know that you've kept your side of the street clean.
And again, that's where I'm thinking with the groups, having other women say, well, we tried to get an apology and this
Right.
happened, that happened. Because
Yep.
that's the big one. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Una, that wanting to punish or the person to be
Mm-hmm.
punished for their bad behavior and
Yep.
or wanting an apology and
Right.
or thinking that going to court is going to have the judge say you are the
Mm-hmm.
good person, they are the bad
Mm-hmm.
person. That never
Yeah.
happens. It's not going to.
Not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not
Not going to
Judge
happen.
Judy in family court.
Right. 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 Right.
And unfortunately, those shows, because there was divorce court on TV for a while too, I think,
Right.
where the judge
Yep.
would make comments like that. That doesn't
Right.
happen in
It doesn't.
typical family court
It
situations.
doesn't. Yeah.
So, Una, when you wrote the book, tell us a little bit about the actual mechanics and the parts that you included in the book, because I'm so excited that this is launching and coming out, and I really want people to understand what the book is that's different from some of the other
Mhm.
divorce books out there.
Right. So, great question. The book really has three main components in it. One component is just real practical information. So, how do you initiate a divorce? Or if a divorce is initiated for you, how do you cope with that? What is the definition of a traumatic divorce, for instance? And then how do you tell people that you're getting divorced? You don't tell, your best friend the same thing as you tell, you're the person down at the coffee shop, right?
Right,
So how do you decide who to tell, what to tell, when to tell? How do you tell your kids? How do you support your kids through a divorce? How do you renegotiate your boundaries? And how do you cope with kind of the roller coaster of feelings that come up in a divorce? So that's one section, is just really practical tips about kind of the emotional journey. The second part is that I think women often feel very isolated and lonely in their divorce. And so I have just filled this book with tons of vignettes so that they can really relate as they're reading. They're going to say, oh, yeah, that's me. I can really relate to that. I can really relate to this story, so that they don't feel so alone, or they don't feel crazy. They feel like, oh, this person feels this way too. Okay, I'm not the only one, you
right,
know? And then the third part of the book is some exercises, so that throughout the book, you're really thinking about your marriage, what worked, what didn't work, your divorce, and then post divorce, your identity and who you want to be. because it really is an opportunity to have a new identity. So who do you want to be? And women are so accustomed to thinking about everybody else. They're very good at it,
Right.
thinking about everybody else. And so it's hard to have time to think about yourself. But these exercises are just little, encouragements to really think or write about, your own experience so that you learn and grow from the divorce.
Wonderful. And what a great resource. Oona, give us the title of your book again.
It's Unhitched, the Essential Divorce Guide for Women, and it's available at Amazon, at Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, anywhere that books are sold, or a local bookstore if you like. So
Wonderful. So please run out, grab a copy of Oona's book. You can pre-order it if you're listening to this before January 13th. After January 13th, it will be available all over the place. So Oona,
that's right.
thank you so much for being here and sharing this information, particularly not only about your amazing book that's coming out, but also about the power of group coaching and supporting women through divorce. So thank you for what you do, Oona.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure.
Well, the pleasure's all mine. And for those of you watching us on YouTube, thank you so much for your time. Don't forget to like and subscribe and listen in to the next Spotlight on the Divorce Expert.